Hello students. Till now we have covered one unit and we have already discussed about social research and introduction, where we have seen the meaning, significance of social research, criteria for good research, objectivity which we have to maintain when we are doing the research, and the fourth point was the relationship between theory and research. Now today we will going to start with our unit 2, and this unit is all about the approaches in social research. In this unit 2, we are going to see four approaches. The first is positivist approach, second critical approach, third interpretative approach, and fourth feminist approach. Now let's see the objective of this particular topic, that is positivist approach. Objective is to understand the positivist approach in social research and its use of scientific methods to study social phenomena. And the learning outcome, by the end of this lesson, you are able to explain the main feature of positivist approach and identify how quantitative data is used to study social behavior. So students, let's begin with our topic, that is positivist approach, and we'll see how this positivist approach are using, or how we can use this positive approach when we are doing a research. So the positivist approach in sociology is the idea that society should be studied scientifically using methods similar to those used in the natural sciences. In a simple term, we can understand positivist belief that we can understand society by observing social behavior, collecting data and facts, using surveys, statistics, and experiments, looking for pattern and cause and effects relationship, trying to remain objective rather than relying mainly on personal opinions. So to explain this or to make you understand, I'll give you one example. Like suppose a sociologist wants to study school dropout rates. A positivist might collect data from thousands of students and examine whether factors such as family, income, attendance, or school resources are statistically related to dropping out. So this example can help you to understand the positivist approach. So here mainly the Auguste Comte, who is often considered the father of positive sociology, and he argued that society could be studied scientifically and that sociology should discover a general laws of social life. So we can understand in a simple sentence, we can say positivism means studying society through a systematic observation, measurable evidence, and scientific method. So students, the basic idea behind positivism is very simple. Society can be studied scientifically just like the natural world. Think about how a scientist studies physical phenomena. They observe it, they collect the data, they measure the thing, compare the result, and look for patterns. Positivist sociologists believe that we can do same thing, or similarly we can do, or we can study the society. As here it is mentioned that scientific technique and social laws. So positivists believes that society is not completely random. There are patterns and regularities in social life. For example, suppose we want to understand crime. Instead of simply asking people, why do you think crime happens, a positivist sociologist might collect the data about age, education, their employment, income, or crime rates. After analyzing a large amount of data, as I have mentioned just now, like they will ask about the age, education, employment, income, crime rates, they may discover the patterns. So the idea is that scientific research can help us discover general laws or principles that influence the society. Now, here it is mentioned the variable and correlations. Okay, so when I'm the this is very important part actually. A variable is something that can change or have a different value. For example, age, income, education, number of children, crime rate. A positivist research may ask, is there relationship between education and income? They collect the data and compare these two variables. If people with more years of education tend on average to have higher income, we say there is a correlation between education and income. Remember, correlation does not automatically mean causation. A relationship between two variables does not by itself prove that one cause the other. The third, as here it is mentioned, the role of researcher. When I'm saying the role of researcher, now imagine you are the sociologist conducting the research. A positivist would say, I should not allow my personal beliefs to influence my research. For example, if you personally believe that employment causes crime, if you personally believe that unemployment causes crime, you should not collect only the information that supports your belief. Instead, you should collect the data, analyze it, and report what the evidence are showing or they shows the result. This is called an objectivity. Now, the fourth point, in these types of studies, research findings are usually observable and quantifiable. So here, observable and quantifiable mean these two words are important. Observable means something that you can study through the evidence or observation. Quantifiable means something that can be measured using numbers. For example, 40% of students in a survey reported experiencing bullying. Okay, that is quantitative information because it can be expressed as a number. Positivist research therefore commonly uses survey, questionnaires, official statistics, structured observation, and statistical analysis. With the help of these, they can quantify, they can remove the quantitative type of information, whichever or wherever it is necessary. Then we are having a researchers independent from the study. So let's begin with this, students. The five main principles of positivism research philosophy can be summarized as follows. So remember, students, one basic idea. Positivism says that society should be studied scientifically using evidence rather than personal opinion or assumption. Now let's understand each point. Same logic across all sciences. The statement says there are no differences in the logic of inquiry across sciences. What does it mean? It means positivists believe that sociology should follow the same basic scientific approach used in other sciences. For example, a biologist studies a disease by observing, collecting data or evidence, testing it, finding patterns, and reaching to a conclusion. A positivist sociologist should also observe, collect the data, analyze, test, and reach a conclusion. The subject is different, but the scientific logic is similar. Then, second is, as mentioned here, research should explain and predict. A good scientific study should answer two questions. One, why does this happen? Explanation. What is likely to be happen? Prediction. For example, suppose we study school dropout. A sociologist might discover that students experiencing certain social and economic conditions have higher dropouts. The researcher can then ask, why are these students more likely to leave school? If these conditions continue, can we predict higher dropout rates? So, positivism is not simply about collecting information, it wants to explain social behavior and predict possible outcomes. Then we are having a research must be based on empirical evidence. Now remember this word empirical. Empirical means what? Based on observation and evidence. Suppose I say students today don't like studying. Is that a scientific conclusion? No, that's just an assumption. Instead, I could conduct a survey of 1000 students and collect information about their study habits. Now I have an empirical data. So, positivist says don't just say something is true, collect evidence and test it. Then we are having the fourth, the inductive reasoning. This one sounds difficult, but it's actually easy. Inductive reasoning means moving from particular observation to a general conclusion. For example, imagine we observe many students. Student A, I'm giving an example. Student A studies regularly, so he gets good marks. Student B is studying regularly, gets good marks. Student C studies regularly and also he is getting a good marks. After observing many students, we may develop the idea that regular study may associated with the better academic performance. We can then create a hypothesis and test it with more data. So remember, observation, then pattern, then general idea, and you can make a hypothesis and you can test the hypothesis. Now the fifth, which is mentioning over here, the fifth point, that science is different from common sense. This is very important in sociology. Common sense means what people normally believe or what seems obvious. For example, someone might say poor people are poor because they don't work hard. That may should like an exam explanation, but a sociologist should not accept it simply because people commonly say it. They should investigate what their employment opportunity, whether they are having an employment opportunity in their surrounding or not, about their education, about their family background, about their economic condition, about their social inequalities and other relevant factors. The evidence might show that common sense explanation is too simple or incorrect. Therefore, common sense gives us an assumption. Science tests those assumptions. Science should be value free. Now imagine you are a researcher studying gender inequality. You personally have strong opinion about the topic. Should your personal opinion decide the result? According to positivism, no. You should collect the evidence and analyze it objectively. This is called value-free research. It does not necessarily mean that researchers have no personal values. Rather than positivist idea is that personal values should not influence how evidence is collected, analyzed, or reported. Now let's continue. This is the table which is illustrating the ontology, epistemology, and axiology. Typical research method which is associated with the positivism. Okay, now let's continue with our first meaning of epistemology. So student, epistemology will try to understand what is epistemology. Epistemology means the theory of knowledge. In simple words, we can say epistemology asks, how do we know what we know? Imagine you are studying poverty in society, the problem of poverty. You may ask, or you might ask, how can I know that poverty exists in that particular area? What counts as reliable knowledge about poverty? Should I use statistics to know the poverty? Should I interview people? How can I know whether my findings are correct? These are epistemological questions. Now I'll give you one easy example to understand it more easily. Suppose I tell you students who study more get better marks. You might ask me, sir, ma'am, how do you know that? I might answer, I collected data from 2000 students and compare their studies are with their examination result. Now you have a method for obtaining knowledge. That is something is called as epistemology. So remember students, epistemology is equals to how can we know about something. Now let's connect this epistemology to positivism. In positivist research, knowledge should generally be obtained through systematic observation, measurement, evidence, and scientific testing. For example, instead of saying, I feel that unemployment causes stress, a positivist research would collect measurable evidence about unemployment and stress and analyze whether there is a relationship between both of them. So, positivism leads to scientific evidence and this will give you a measurable knowledge. Okay? Now let's understand about what is ontology. Ontology is called as a branch of metaphysics dealing with nature of being and is also called as a set of concepts and categories in a subject area or domain that shows their properties and their relation between them. Or uh, we can say ontology is focusing on what is the reality. It asks what we believe the social world actually is. Okay, and how we will going to connect this ontology with positivists? For positivists, social reality is generally seen as something that exists independently for the researcher and can be studied objectively. Now let's understand uh, ontology. So as given here, the explanation, the first point is trying to explain that it is a metaphysics. It is a branch of metaphysics. So the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being. Okay. So here we are trying to call that in philosophy, the study of being asks questions such as what does it mean for something to exist? What kind of the thing is exists? What is nature of reality? Is reality made only of physics things, or are there any other kind of existence? These areas is often called ontology. For example, suppose we are studying crime. An ontological question would be, what is crime? Is crime simply an act that violates a law, or it is something deeper such as social phenomenon created by society? A positivist researcher would approach this differently from a philosopher. The positivist would want to observe and measure crime. For example, how many crimes occurred in a particular city? What factors are statistically with crime? So positivism moves away from purely philosophical speculation and towards observable, measurable reality. Okay. Now first definition is actually describing ontology. Ontology is equals to, or we can explain ontology, it is the study of nature of being, existence and reality. Think of ontology is asking what is reality. This is very important research because your idea about what reality is affect how you conduct research. Okay, so positivist approach generally assumes that there is an objective reality that exists independently of the researcher. For example, imagine that we want to study what does poverty increase crime. So the positivist research might assume that poverty and crime are real social phenomena that can be observed and measured and compared. Okay. Now let's try to understand what is mean by axiology. Okay. So in simple term, we can understand axiology is the philosophical study of values and what is considered valuable. In the positivist approach, or researcher generally seeks to minimize personal values, that whenever we are doing a research, we should not have to use our personal views. Okay, so what we have to do here when we are doing a research, we have to minimize our personal values to bring the objectivity in the research. Yes, when we are maintain the objectivity in research, we can measure the things as positivist approach is more focusing on measurable uh, data. So if we will minimize our personal values, bias and prejudices in when we are doing or conducting a research, so what we are going to do here, we are going to focus more on objectivity through the observable phenomena, and this the data which we are going to collect will going to be a measurable empirical evidences. Okay, so that is mean by axiology. Now let's continue the shortcoming or the disadvantages of positivism. So the first disadvantage is here that positivism relies on experiences uh, valid sources of knowledge. However, wide range of basic important concepts such as cause, time, space, not are based on experiences that may lead to the shortcoming of positivism. Second, positivism assumes that all the types of processes can be perceived as a certain variation of action of individual or relationship between individual. Third, adoption of positivism in business studies and other studies can be criticized for reliance on its status quo, or in other words, we can say the finding in positive studies are only descriptive, thus they lack insight into the in-depth issues or data collection. I hope you all have understood this positivism and how we can use this positivist approach when we are dealing with our when we are doing a research. So we have to keep all these things in our mind, that we have to epistemologically, ontologically, and axiologically, it should be correct as uh, the things which we have to remember when we are doing a research. Ontology means what is a reality. Okay, we have to keep in mind that we have to find out the reality. Epistemology, that how we can know the reality. So here we have to focus on reality. Okay, the ways, different ways we have to choose to know the reality. And axiology is what do we value. Okay, so we have to reduce our personal values over here, and we have to focus more on objectivity to maintain the objectivity in the research. Okay, so this is all about today's lecture. I hope you all have understood. So we'll finish with this topic, and we're going to continue with our topic in our next lecture. Thank you.